to the front line today to try and clear out the final pockets of Krajina Serb resistance. The Croatians are urging those troops still holed up just a few miles from here to surrender. But this was the defiant answer from rebel Serb artillery. And today Croatian troops only managed to capture the town of Krajina after what was described as the heaviest fighting of the war. Resistance has certainly been more stubborn in the north of the Krajina than in the south, where a string of towns like this one, Krajina, have fallen to the Croats far more easily than expected. In many cases, the Krajina Serbs have simply turned and run. According to the United Nations, though, in at least one case, the Croats have used tactics that violate the Geneva Convention. They forced unarmed Danish peacekeepers and prisoners of war to walk in front of them as they advanced.
These soldiers were being used as walking human shields. There's no other way to describe the actions of the Croatian army. They were forced to walk in front of advancing tanks. Presumably they felt that the Serbs would not attack if they saw peacekeepers with blue berets or blue helmets on their heads. It was a clear use of soldiers to fend off attacks by the enemy.
The Croats are denying it, but today they have signed an important agreement allowing UN human rights monitors to stay in the Krajina. Tonight, Croatian troops are more concerned with celebrating their success. They say they are the real rapid reaction force in the former Yugoslavia, and they claim that they have destroyed the dream of a greater Serbia in one weekend. Ben Brown, BBC News, Croatia.
A day after Knin, the capital of Krajina, fell, the UN has accused the Croat army of widespread looting and torching in the town. The UN is demanding access to all the areas captured by the Croats and says the humanitarian situation in Knin is desperate.
The town of Knin was a prize much desired by the Croat army. Having shelled it, they surprised themselves by the speed with which they could fly their flag from the central fortress. Today, the former Serbian stronghold was quiet. The Croats relaxed and in control of the situation. Just the odd souvenir and spoil of war in evidence. And a definite air of victory. Most of the damage was done by artillery. There is little evidence of heavy fighting on the streets. The Serb soldiers left, along with virtually the entire population. A handful of elderly people are to be seen. There's just a few of us left here, she says, and they're now under Croat administration, personified by the Interior Minister, inspecting his newly installed police force. They've got a town, yet another, wrecked and littered by war, with houses still being torched today by a jubilant army. The UN could not, still cannot intervene. It's not to be seen on the streets, confined to its base along with several hundred refugees. Whatever has been done in the name of war in this offensive, the Croats have achieved it away from international view, despite 10,000 UN troops stationed in the area of conflict, and regardless of outside opinion. Kate Adey, BBC News, Krajina.
The Serb withdrawal from Krajina has left the Bosnian Serb leadership in apparent disarray. 18 senior army generals have condemned the Bosnian Serb leader, Radovan Karadzic, for sacking his military commander, Ratko Mladic. He reportedly didn't want his troops to get involved in the battle for Krajina. Japan has been remembered
again between Croatian troops and the Serbs in Krajina after a ceasefire aimed at allowing thousands of refugees to leave the area collapsed. The Croatian government says their offensive has now ended, but there are still reports of sporadic fighting in the region. As a result of the breakdown of the ceasefire, thousands of refugees who were trying to get to the Bosnian Serb stronghold of Banja Luka or to the Serb border have been trapped by the subsequent fighting. Tonight we have three reports from John Devitt, who's following the refugee crisis, Nicholas Witchell, who's in the town of Knin, and first Matt Fry, who reports from Krajina.
The Serbs have lost this war, but today they tried to regain some territory and credibility. Croatian and Serbian warplanes were flying bombing missions. Serbian shells shook the Croatian town of Karlovac. While the well-armed Croats have been savouring their victory, Serbian soldiers were supposed to hand in all their weapons apart from side-arms. These prisoners of war obeyed their victors' orders, but many other Serbs resisted. Despite pockets of resistance, the overwhelming picture is one of a devastating defeat for the Serbs. Near the town of Krajina, burnt-out tanks litter the street, while Croatian refugees are already returning home to reclaim their houses. The battle for Krajina lasted less than 3 days. The Serbian population had clearly left in a hurry. In one house, we found laundry still drying on the stove. The washing up had just been done, and everywhere there was evidence of looting. Many Croatian families who were pushed out by Serbian soldiers 4 years ago are now returning. They have little sympathy for the Serbs who've taken their place on the refugee trail.
They live in my house in 4 years, and they destroyed it and they run away.
The Croatian authorities have been mopping up the aftermath of battle. They've wasted no time in resettling the towns and villages that they've taken. The Croatian government has said that it wants Serbian civilians to stay in captured towns like Krajina. But considering the legacy of propaganda and terror, as well as the heavy fighting that this town has seen, it's very unlikely that any Serbs will want to return. Matt Fry, BBC News, Krajina.
Britain's Defence Secretary Michael Portillo has criticised the Croatian offensive in Krajina. He said driving people from their homes amounted to ethnic cleansing. Tonight there's a report that the thousands of refugees on the move have been hit by shelling, causing an unknown number of casualties.
Thousands of Krajina Serbs continue to stream into Bosnia. This is just over the border at Bosanski Petrovac. Using any means possible, they've crossed the mountains, carrying as many of their belongings as possible. Most of the refugees are simply heading east, away from the fighting. The United Nations has sent food aid in a convoy from Serbia, the first of several planned for this week. For thousands, their ultimate destination is Serbia. There's been a steady stream on the main roads leading to Belgrade, and the UN estimate about 800 people an hour are crossing into the country. About 1,000 have found a temporary home in this sports stadium at Sremska Mitrovica, about 80 kilometers from Belgrade. This family from Knin had an hour to pack their possessions. They were relatively well off. Now they've left everything behind. The father said he'd spent all his life living happily with his Croat neighbors. Now he wanted to kill himself. This woman said history was repeating itself, and the international community was turning a blind eye. In the past, an estimated 95% of refugees arriving here in Serbia found homes with families. But times have changed. The Serbian economy is in tatters, and the refugees are no longer as welcome as they once were. At this sports centre, the Serbian authorities seem to be hopelessly overstretched. The main diet seems to be popcorn, bread and soup. John Devitt, BBC News, Serbia.
The Croatian military action in Krajina has renewed speculation about the ultimate aims of its president, Franjo Tudjman. There have been rumours for some time that President Tudjman and Serbia's President Milosevic have made a secret deal to reshape the boundaries of Bosnia to suit their political aims. At a recent banquet in London, President Tudjman drew a map on the back of a menu to show what he thought Bosnia would look like in 10 years' time. What it amounts to is the end of Bosnia, with the country being carved up between Croatia and Serbia and an S-shaped border dividing them to the east of Sarajevo. Well, I'm joined now from Sarajevo by our correspondent Martin Bell. Martin, President Tudjman has made his ultimate goal very clear indeed. How achievable is it?
I don't think it's achievable. It's not a plan, it's a dream. It's a long-held dream. He's an old man and it's unlikely to be achieved in his lifetime, if at all. He's dealing with the art of the possible. Croatia is to some extent politically and economically a client state of the United States and of Germany, who would not allow that kind of expansion, which is not to say he's not going to go for the next and final stage in this, which is the liberation of his eastern territories, eastern Slavonia, especially the town of Vukovar, which means much more to Croats than any place they have liberated in these past days.
So do you think that a deal of sorts has been done between President Tudjman and Serbia's President Milosevic?
There are deals and there are understandings. I think this was an understanding. Very clear signals from the Croats that they were going for sectors north and south round Knin and north. Very clear signals from Belgrade that the Serbs of Serbia were not going to intervene this time. The government-controlled media had indicated as much, and this gave Tudjman the go-ahead to do what he did.
At the moment, we've got 30,000 Krajina Serbs marching across Bosnia with the refugees, with all the potential to link up with the Bosnian Serbs. Where does that leave the mainly Muslim Bosnian government?
Deeply worried. And it leaves the United Nations here deeply worried. If, as the UN believes, 35,000 armed soldiers have come across with the potential of joining the Bosnian Serb army, that solves one of the main problems the Bosnian Serb army had, which is a shortage of manpower. And of course, it's very destabilizing, and it could end up with the mainly Muslim Bosnian army having a very hard time once more.
Martin Bell in Sarajevo, thanks very much.
Throughout the Croatian offensive, foreign journalists have been kept away from the fighting. But this morning, the United Nations Special Envoy, Jasushi Akashi, was flown into the former Krajina Serb capital, Knin, now held by the Croats. Our diplomatic correspondent, Nicholas Witchell, went with him and has just sent this report.
They arrived at the UN's gates on Friday night, driven from their homes by the Croat bombardment and desperate for sanctuary. Many were old people, others were sick, unwilling or unable to join the tens of thousands who'd chosen to flee from the town which has been a Serb heartland for generations. Many had lost not just homes, but families.
Well, three people were shot dead in the tractor.
There used to be about 35,000 Serbs living in Knin. It had been a Serb community for 300 years. Now there are just a few hundred, frightened, and here at the UN base, hoping for protection. The UN's Mr. Akashi had come to seek assurances from the Croats that human rights will be respected and to arrange urgent humanitarian assistance. The Croat general, whose forces drove the Serbs out a few days ago, was also there. He's the new military governor of Knin and anxious to reassure. General, may I ask you a question in front of the television cameras of the world?
Yes,
here?
no problem.
Can you guarantee that these people will be safe in their homes? Can you give that guarantee in front of the BBC and the media of the world today?
Možete li garantirati ovim ljudima da će biti sigurni u svojim kućama i to da garantirate pred svjetskim medijima jer on predstavnik...
Ja im totalno to garantiram I ja odgovaram za to.
Yes, he said he could give an absolute guarantee, but Croat tanks and soldiers are still on the streets of Knin. Croat flags are flying everywhere. The town is deserted. Its Serb citizens have gone, probably never to return. Nicholas Witchell, BBC News, Knin.
Other news now. A
250,000 Serbs were streaming across Bosnia from Krajina today after its stunning capture by Croatian forces. Croatia said tonight the battle was over. It's apparently about to begin demobilizing some of its troops, although it claimed its military success had changed the entire balance of power in the region. The Serbs fleeing Krajina are mostly civilians, but they include fighting men who've had to leave any heavy weapons behind. In the last few minutes, we've received these pictures of one Serb refugee convoy which came under air attack in Bosnia. Witnesses said at least 5 people were killed, including a girl of 5, and at least 15 were wounded. The Serbs said it was a Croatian MiG-21 which attacked them, though there was no independent confirmation of that. ITN's Colin Baker reports now from Pale, the Bosnian Serb capital.
They are without homes, they are without hope. In fear they flee the conquering Croat, in whose hands their futures will be bleaker and shorter. The shells came down like rain, they said. We saved our lives, but lost everything else. They fled by whatever means they could, leaving Krajina for Bosnia, leaving one war for another. Nearly 200,000 people, mostly women, children and the elderly, are on the move. The Red Cross said that they were terrified, emotional, exhausted, and many were dehydrated. While an estimated 2/3 of Krajina's Serbian population are heading east, Yugoslav armoured columns from Belgrade have been moving west. It's thought they've been deployed along Serbia's western border with Croatia. The UN has accused the Croats of shelling lines of refugees in western Bosnia. The relief agencies are taking in aid and medical equipment. They say there's a record number of wounded people among the refugees. The Red Cross said it had planned for such an eventuality, but even they underestimated the size of this human catastrophe. During the night, remnants of the Krajina Serb army attacked the eastern Croat town of Osijek with a barrage of artillery fire. And all day long in the town, the air raid siren sent people running for shelters, the sound creating almost as much fear as the shelling. Here in the former Yugoslavia, the people know only too well the meaning of ceasefire. As today has shown, a ceasefire is simply a brief respite before the next act of war. Over the next few days, the full extent of this tragedy will be realized. The relief agencies will try and feed and count the refugees, but here in the Bosnian Serb capital, they're asking, how many prisoners did the Croatians take? How many remain? Colin Baker, News at 10, Pale.
Our diplomatic editor, James Mates, travelled down into Krajina today from the Croatian capital, Zagreb. He went with a British UN aid convoy. He reports now on what he saw and on the possible deal behind the battle for Krajina.
It is one of the biggest humanitarian crises in 4 years of war, and yet there is aid available to alleviate it. These 10 British lorries set off this morning for the enclave of Bihać, believing the fighting had died down and that they could finally get the aid to where it was needed. But not for the first time, they were forced to turn round and head back to Zagreb. To the British drivers, it was yet another day of frustration.
They must be really suffering quite badly at the moment. It'd be great if we can get in tomorrow.
Dozens of towns abandoned by their Serb populations are now deserted, except for a handful of occupying troops. In the days when this land was known as Yugoslavia, Serb and Croat had lived here in almost equal numbers. 4 years ago, it was the Serbs who were victorious on the battlefield and the Croats who were driven from their homes. Now these houses have changed hands once again. Only this time the Serbs, knowing what to expect, fled before the tanks arrived. Croatians are now slowly returning, many to find their homes had been torched in their absence.
The one that destroyed is Croatian house. The one that is not destroyed is Serb house, if you can understand it.
A Catholic nun returned to the town of Petrinia this morning to discover the church had been demolished and every trace removed by bulldozers. To the Serbs of the Orthodox religion, destroying all signs of Catholicism was just another aspect of ethnic cleansing. But now the world waits to see whether the Croats, under their president Franjo Tudjman, will be as bad, and indeed whether they plan to send their army on to conquer parts of Bosnia as well. A map Tudjman sketched for the Liberal leader Paddy Ashdown 3 months ago appears to show him planning to divide up Bosnia between Croatia and Serbia, which, if true, would mean Bosnia's Muslims being utterly crushed. The Croatians deny any such plans and say that anyway, they're demobilizing 70% of their army. They believe they've settled something here, but in the last 4 years, very few of the issues that have divided the former Yugoslavia have really been settled on the battlefield. James Mates, News at 10, Croatia.
Here, doctors and...
Cameron. Croatians celebrate victory in Krajina, but is their triumph a prelude to peace or to a wider war? Good evening. All over, bar the misery of the